I knew something was wrong when the coffee tasted like salt. Not just off, salty. Like she'd dipped her finger in the ocean and stirred it herself. I looked across the kitchen island at her. She was on her phone, as usual, thumbs tapping like she was auditioning for a texting championship. Same glazed eyes. Same dry ponytail. Same flannel pajama pants with avocado prints that she wore when she didn't want me to look at her. You put salt in the coffee? I asked, trying to keep it casual. She didn't look up. Didn't touch your coffee. Mine tastes fine. Yours must have. Then don't drink mine, she snapped, finally meeting my eyes with the enthusiasm of someone staring at DMV paperwork. It was 7:03 a.m. Tuesday. That was the exact moment I decided to check the security camera in the garage. Let me be clear, I'm not some paranoid nutjob. I don't read conspiracy blogs or watch those She Cheated, so I built a robot to expose her videos. I'm just a guy named Wallace who loves his wife. Loved. Sorry. I installed the camera 8 months ago after my drill set got stolen. Never thought I'd use it for anything other than catching raccoons or Amazon drivers launching packages like footballs. But that morning, the salt in her mug didn't feel like an accident. 2 hours later, while she was out for a walk, her new routine that somehow included hair extensions, perfume, and heels, I loaded up the app on my tablet. Motion trigger from 1:14 a.m. My hand started shaking before I even pressed play. There she was, wearing my hoodie, opening the garage door, waving someone in. Someone with no face. Literally. They kept their hood up the entire time. He, or they, or whoever, stood on my property for exactly 6 minutes, handed her something in a black duffel bag, then pointed at our kitchen window. She didn't flinch. She didn't even pretend to be nervous. She gave him a high five. A literal high five. Then the video ended. At 6:45 that evening, I tried to talk to her. I asked her what she got from the guy. She said it was a return from Facebook Marketplace. When I asked what it was, she said gym stuff. We don't have a gym. We don't even own a yoga mat. I asked why he pointed at the kitchen window. She said, "You watched the footage? You're spying now?" Then she stormed off and locked herself in the bathroom for 2 hours, blasting lo-fi music and eating crackers under the shower head like she was camping. I sat at the dinner table in silence. Again. Alone. Again. With mashed potatoes hardening like cement on the plate across from mine. And then, 2 days later, came the moment. The straw. The twist. The kill shot. It was Friday. I told her I'd booked a weekend at a cabin 2 hours away. The same one she bookmarked 3 years ago when we still pretended to be in love. I even printed the receipt. Held it out like a peace offering. Like a dumb, clumsy olive branch from a man who didn't want to die alone. She looked at the paper. Then back at me. Smirked. And said, "Are you even sure we're still a couple?" That was it. That was all it took. I tossed my ring on the floor. Not the table. Not the counter. The floor. Let it bounce and roll like some forgotten arcade token. "No more," I said. "I'm done." She didn't laugh. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She froze. Dead silent. For the first time in months, the phone was out of her hands. And I knew. She hadn't expected me to walk away. But I did. And the moment I shut the front door behind me, her phone lit up. I swear I saw the contact name flash. Just for a second. Jeremy, not work. I didn't go far. Just to my car. Just far enough to keep from screaming. I sat in the driveway for 11 minutes. Yeah, I counted, watching the porch light flicker like it was debating whether to stay on for her or for me. My wedding ring was still in the hallway. My dignity. Somewhere between the crumpled receipt for that cabin and the salt-soaked coffee that started it all. My phone buzzed. One notification. Venmo. Delaney sent $3.00. Caption. For your little tantrum baby bottle. That was the moment I stopped hoping she'd explain anything. There it was, mockery in digital form, with a baby bottle emoji just to twist the knife. Now, I'm not a confrontational guy. I wasn't going to storm back inside and yell. But I was going to figure out who Jeremy, not work, was. And I had a pretty good place to start. See, she'd left her iPad on the couch. And unlike her phone, the iPad didn't have Face ID turned on. No password. No thumbprint. Just pure, sweet, open access. I know how that sounds. Like I'm invading privacy. But let me ask you something. If someone locks the doors, lies to your face, makes you drink seawater coffee, and high-fives a faceless man in your garage, is privacy still a currency they get to spend? I opened her messages app. and it felt like falling into cold water. Jeremy, not work. He still thinks y'all are going to that cabin? Loudly crying face. Delaney. He printed the reservation out like a child. I almost choked pretending to care. Jeremy. Ugh. Don't waste tears on him. You're not the one losing here. Then a photo. One she'd sent him earlier that morning. Her. In our bathroom mirror, wearing the hoodie I thought was mine, the one she'd insisted was too soft to give back. She captioned it. He still thinks I sleep in this because I miss him, LOL. Another message from Jeremy. Can't wait till the house is yours. Then we can burn that hoodie together fire. I couldn't breathe. My mouth went dry. I felt like I was reading about someone else's wife. Someone else's life. But I wasn't. This was mine. This was the woman I'd paid credit card interest for just to surprise with birthday spa trips. The same woman who cried when our rescue dog died and made me think she had a heart. I kept scrolling. And then I saw something worse. A message from Jeremy sent 2 weeks ago, 2:43 a.m. He's too soft to leave. Just keep pushing. He'll eventually snap and make it easier. She replied an hour later. I'm trying. Just hoping he throws in the towel before I have to fake counseling again. Fake counseling. Let me pause for a second. You ever sit in a therapy room, pouring your guts out, talking about how you'll try to be more assertive while your wife nods solemnly and sips cucumber water? Yeah, I did that. 7 sessions. Apparently, they were part of her script. And suddenly, everything made sense. Why she always wanted to be the one who picked the therapist. Why she never let me see the email confirmations. Why she once said, let's take a break from this for a bit, the very week I admitted I thought I was the reason she stopped being intimate. I closed the iPad. Hands shaking. Skin flushed. Vision blurred. There was no yelling. No dramatic confrontation. No I caught you scene. Just silence. Just me. Sitting alone in a used Toyota in the driveway of a house I paid 78% of, watching the woman I loved text a man named Not Work. She'd weaponized apathy. And I had no defense. And then I did something I didn't expect. I started the engine. Not to drive away, but to go somewhere specific. To someone specific. Her mom. Yep. Strap in. Because Delaney's mom, Valerie, knew things. And she hated Jeremy. I hadn't spoken to Valerie, Delaney's mom, in 4 months. Not since she drunkenly told me at Thanksgiving that I looked like a man who folds laundry for sport. She always had that sharp tongue, the kind that made people wince mid-laugh, but it was wrapped in perfume and pearls and a false sense of charm. Still, something about her always made me feel like she knew her daughter better than I ever would. That night, I pulled up to her house just before 9 p.m. I expected her to slam the door in my face or at least act confused, but instead, she opened the door like she'd been waiting for me. Took you long enough, she muttered, stepping aside without a single question. No hello. No how are you? Just a glass of wine in her hand, and that same icy stare Delaney must have learned in the womb. I walked into the same living room I used to sit in while Valerie grilled me about my 5-year plan. The same couch, where Delaney once fell asleep in my lap after we told her mom we were engaged. It all felt like a museum now, every memory covered in dust and dishonesty. She didn't sit, just walked into the kitchen and said over her shoulder, "So what finally broke you? The lies or the laughter?" That stopped me cold. What do you mean? Valerie sighed and took a slow sip of her wine. Delaney doesn't lie like normal people. She lies like an artist. The kind of person who'd frame her own cheating as emotional growth. You don't come here unless you've seen something. I pulled out my phone, opened the screenshot, handed it to her silently. She read the message from Jeremy, the one where he said I was too soft to leave. Then she read Delaney's reply, about faking counseling, about hoping I'd snap. Valerie didn't blink, just poured more wine and said, "She's worse than her father." And that's when I realized. Valerie wasn't surprised. Not even close. She led me downstairs to the basement. I'd never been down there before. She always kept it locked, always said it was just storage. But that night, she opened the door without hesitation. What I saw made me dizzy. 2 boxes, one labeled Delaney, College, the other labeled Delaney, Do Not Burn. Inside were printed emails, scribbled journals, photos of old boyfriends, and most haunting of all, a stack of old therapy notes. Not mine. Hers. The real ones. From therapists I'd never heard of long before we met. There were entries about manipulation, control, Narcissistic patterns. Even one describing a high school relationship she destroyed, just to see if she could make the boy cry in front of his friends. Valerie pulled out a folded sheet of yellow paper and said, "She wrote this when she was 17. Read it." It said, "He believed me." Of course he did. They always do at first. But the trick is not just making them love you. It's making them hate themselves without ever yelling. That's power. I had to sit down. My knees weren't working. My mouth was dry again, like I'd swallowed chalk. I asked her the only thing I could think of, "Why are you showing me this now?" Valerie looked at me with the saddest expression I've ever seen on a woman who'd otherwise spit venom with a smile. "Because you're the first one who hasn't called me crazy." The room felt too small, the air too thick. I suddenly felt like I was inside someone else's memory, and I didn't know how to get out. I looked back down at the box labeled "Do Not Burn" and said, "Why that label?" She finished her wine, poured another, looked me dead in the eyes. "Because if I burned it, I'd have nothing left to prove that she was real, that I didn't imagine all of this, that she isn't some perfect, misunderstood woman like she wants everyone to think. And because, deep down, I still want to believe she can be fixed." There it was. Hope. Even in a woman who knew her daughter was dangerous. Even after all that darkness, Valerie still hoped she could be saved. But I didn't. Not anymore. And I hadn't even seen the worst yet. Because upstairs, in Delaney's childhood bedroom, something else was waiting for me. Something Valerie hadn't shown anyone. Not the journals. Not the therapy notes. Not the texts. Something much more personal. And much more recent. Valerie didn't ask if I wanted to see the bedroom. She just walked upstairs, like it was a formality, like the path had already been laid out and I just had to follow it. I moved slow behind her, each step on the staircase creaking like it knew what was coming. Delaney's old room was untouched. Pink walls, faded posters, a cracked mirror taped at the corners like someone couldn't quite let go of what they'd broken. There was a dusty stuffed rabbit on the dresser and a crooked class of 2010 tassel hanging from a nail in the wall. It didn't feel like a place frozen in time. It felt like a place that refused to die. Valerie went straight to the closet. "You're not going to like what's in here," she said, voice flat. "But if I don't show you now, you'll spend the rest of your life thinking you were crazy. And I'm too old to keep watching men lose themselves over her." She pulled out a large blue box with a cheap gold lock that had already been cracked open. It had a faint sticker on it that said letters in teenage handwriting. Not cute scrapbook letters. Not college recommendation letters. No, these were something else entirely. She set the box on the bed and stepped back like she didn't want to touch it again. I sat down in front of it and opened the lid. The first thing I saw was a printed photo, not a selfie, not a Polaroid. A grainy black and white surveillance image. It showed a man, maybe mid-30s, standing outside a diner, holding flowers. Alone. Confused. Waiting. On the back, in Delaney's unmistakable handwriting, was written, "Told him I'd meet him for dinner after dumping Wallace. Never showed up. Wanted to see how long he'd wait." My spine stiffened. The next envelope was stuffed with receipts. Dinner bills. Hotel bookings. Everything dated before we were even married. I flipped through them. Her name, other men's names, time-stamped notes she'd scrawled in the margins like she was a scientist cataloging an experiment. He cried after I ignored him all weekend. Said he was falling in love. Told him I was sick and ghosted for 9 days. Convinced this one I was quitting alcohol for him. Took a shot mid-date just to see the look on his face. These weren't love letters. They were trophies. Every one. Then I found a spiral notebook, and even before opening it, I knew this would be the worst of it. I was right. The first page had a title. People who would still say yes if I called right now. My name was number 3. Third. Behind a guy named Rowan, and someone just labeled Jim. Next to my name, she'd written, "Will always believe he's part of the problem. Has a savior complex. Dangerous because he clings too long. If things get bad, cry and mention miscarriage idea again. Neutralizes his anger." I nearly vomited. I remembered that conversation. 2 years ago. She came into the bedroom sobbing. Told me she thought she'd had a miscarriage. I'd never seen her so broken. I held her all night. Cried with her. Didn't leave her side for 3 days. I even blamed myself for working late too often, for missing the signs. And now here it was. Weaponized grief. A lie cataloged and filed away like a business strategy. I didn't realize I was crying until Valerie handed me a tissue without a word. She told me she was journaling for therapy, I whispered. Valerie laughed once. Dry and bitter. Honey, Delaney doesn't journal to process emotions. She journals to sharpen knives. I looked around the room. Everything in there was hers. The makeup kits, the faded trophies, the stack of old phone cases shaped like cartoon animals. But it all felt haunted. Like every object had witnessed something they couldn't confess to. And then I noticed something half buried beneath the bed. A small, dented shoebox with a cracked lid. I pulled it out slowly, like it might bite me. Inside were burner phones. 4 of them, each labeled with sticky notes. D, T, Jim, backup, and the last one, the newest, J, not work. The very same Jeremy from the messages. And on that phone were voicemails. I listened to the most recent one. Jeremy's voice, smug, raspy, and way too comfortable. He's going to lose it soon. You want me to stage the scene, or are you going to fake a meltdown again? Either way, let me know before Monday. My lease ends, and I'd rather not crash at a hotel while you're still pretending to love him. That was it. I closed the box. My body felt like rubber. I stood up, walked out of the room without a word, and sat back in my car for over an hour. Keys in the ignition, radio off, headlights aimed at nothing. I wasn't just betrayed. I was part of a long-running social experiment. And I had just become her final data point. I didn't sleep that night. I didn't even go home. I parked in the back of an abandoned outlet mall and just sat there with the heater running, replaying Jeremy's voicemail on loop until the words didn't even sound like English anymore. I kept trying to decode something that wasn't even hiding. A man who was fully complicit, casual, confident that I was too pathetic to do anything but melt quietly into the background. I should have felt rage. But all I felt was humiliation. Like I'd walked in on a party where I was the theme of the joke, and everyone else knew the punchline months before I even got the invite. By sunrise, I knew what I needed to do. Not for revenge. Not for closure. Just to know I hadn't lost my mind completely. I needed to find Rowan. He was number 1 on Delaney's, would still say yes list, and the only one with a last name scribbled next to it. Rowan C. I remembered once, years ago, she mentioned a college boyfriend with that name. Said he was too emotional, and still lived with his mom after graduation. That was all I knew. But now, with Valerie's help, I had something better. A last known address from one of the receipts she'd found in the blue box. A town about 45 minutes east, tucked between 2 abandoned railroad lines and a dying shopping district. Rowan's name was still listed on the buzzer of a faded brick apartment building with ivy choking the gutters. The intercom button was broken, so I stood outside until someone came out with a dog, slipped in behind them, and climbed the stairs to 3B. When I knocked, I expected shouting. A slammed door. Maybe even a punch. What I didn't expect was a guy who looked exactly like me. Same height. Same build. Slightly older. Wore the same kind of muted flannel I had on. Same quiet eyes. Same tired jawline like we both chewed our shame for breakfast. He stared at me for a few seconds, then stepped aside without saying a word, as if he'd been waiting years for this moment. We sat in his tiny living room, surrounded by unopened mail and a dead plant in the window. I told him everything. The coffee, the duffel bag in the garage, the burner phones, the notebook with his name in it. He didn't interrupt once. When I finally stopped, he exhaled like he'd just surfaced from underwater. She used to unplug the Wi-Fi when I'd email my mom, he said quietly. Said I was too emotionally enmeshed and needed to grow up. He walked over to a drawer, pulled out a framed photo, and handed it to me. It was him and Delaney at some music festival. She had glitter on her cheeks, hair braided, leaning into him like she belonged there. He looked happy in that picture, almost bright. She told me I was her anchor, he muttered. Then she told her therapist I was dead weight. I asked him why he stayed. He gave me a look I recognized instantly. The look of a man trying not to admit he loved someone who dismantled him. Like saying it aloud would somehow make it true again. She didn't destroy me all at once, he said. She studied me, got me to open up, told me my sensitivity was beautiful. Then, after 6 months, she started making fun of it in public. Called me sweetheart in front of her friends like it was a disease. Started laughing when I flinched at loud arguments. I nodded slowly. I knew every note of that symphony. Then he pulled something from his drawer. A tiny cassette recorder. One of those old-school black plastic ones with the red record button. She left this in my car after our last fight, he said. By accident, I think. There was one recording on it. He pressed play. Delaney's voice crackled through the speakers. If I could bottle their confusion and sell it, I'd be a billionaire. They always get that same look when you start pulling the strings. Half betrayal, half hope. God, it's addictive. I sat there, blinking at the floor. Rowan turned off the recorder. She ever say anything like that to you? He asked. I shook my head. No, but she didn't have to. I think I always knew. We sat in silence for a long while, two discarded chapters from the same cruel book. Brothers not by blood, but by devastation. Before I left, he handed me the recorder. You're going to need this, he said. Eventually, she's going to turn it on you. You're going to be the unstable one, the obsessive ex. Have something real when it happens. I didn't say goodbye. I just walked out and drove straight to the bank. Because Rowan was right. Delaney had been preparing the next move. And if I didn't act fast, she'd flip the narrative and erase the truth before I ever had a chance to tell it. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the sun was already bleeding into the trees behind the house, staining the sky in those dusty orange streaks that always made her say things like, "Isn't that just the saddest kind of pretty?" She said that once during a road trip, 3 years ago. It stuck with me. Everything did. That was my problem. But tonight, it felt like a warning. The porch light was off. No car in the garage. No music playing from the kitchen. No click of her heels down the hallway. Silence. Stillness. And for the first time in months, the door was unlocked. That was Delaney's first mistake. I stepped inside cautiously, as if the walls could still hear me. The place smelled like sandalwood and peppermint gum, her scent, and it made me nauseous. I wasn't here to argue or scream or demand anything. I had exactly 40 minutes before she'd return from her fake Pilates class, and I wasn't going to waste a second of it. I went straight to the bedroom closet, knelt behind the boxes of winter coats and old board games, and pulled out the small fireproof safe we'd bought during the pandemic. She told me it was for passports and jewelry. But when I opened it using the birth date she always used for passwords, her ex's birthday, by the way, not mine, I found something I wasn't prepared for. Not burner phones. Not journals. But contracts. Legal ones. The first was a lease application. A new apartment across town. Expensive. Upscale. Already approved. Move-in date. 3 weeks from now. Only her name on the paperwork. Then came a series of notarized forms, statements from a private therapist claiming I was emotionally unstable, avoidant, and potentially harmful to her psychological safety. Dated 2 months ago. Completely fabricated. Signed by someone I'd never met. But the worst document wasn't legal at all. It was a letter. Handwritten. Folded into a plain white envelope. Addressed to my employer. Inside was a typed accusation, riddled with just enough truth to make it believable. Claims that I'd been showing up late. Unstable around female co-workers. Verbally aggressive. And potentially misusing confidential company data. It was a powder keg, ready to be dropped the moment I stopped playing along. I sat there on the floor, letter in one hand, recorder from Rowan in the other, my brain split in two. Half of me wanted to scream. The other half just felt cold. Numb. Hollowed out like a shell of the man who used to write her poems in the margins of recipe books. This wasn't just a breakup plan. It was a full character assassination, crafted with precision, launched in silence, and built on the assumption that I would never see it coming. But now I had the evidence. The voicemail. The documents. The timelines. The patterns. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't too sensitive. And I wasn't going to let her win. I left the safe untouched, returned everything exactly as I found it. Even refolded the envelope with the fake HR letter and placed it at the same slight angle she'd left it. She was methodical like that. Everything had to look effortless. I didn't take anything with me. Not the documents. Not the lease. Just photos. I snapped everything. Every signature. Every clause. Every timestamp. Then I went to the kitchen, opened her laptop, and disconnected her iCloud backup. Quietly. Quickly. I downloaded everything from her desktop into a flash drive I'd been carrying since college. One she gave me back when she was helping me organize my life. She'd told me I'd lose it within a week. Funny how things work out. I didn't check the contents of the flash drive right away. I didn't need to. I already had what I came for. The rest? That was just insurance. I left the house at exactly 6:47 p.m., 13 minutes before she'd pull into the driveway and rehearse whatever lie she planned to feed me about how her trainer's spiritual stretching method was changing her life. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't write a note. I didn't even leave a sock out of place. Let her wonder. Let her panic. Let her think maybe, just maybe, I was still too soft to do anything. Let her believe I was still the man who apologized when she hurt me. Because tomorrow morning, I'd be filing for a protective order. And the day after that, I'd be sitting down with a lawyer of my own. And the day after that, the first voicemail from Jeremy would be forwarded directly to her mother, along with a message that read, "You wanted witnesses. Now you've got one." I didn't expect to see her so soon after I left. I thought I had at least a few days, maybe a week, before she'd sense the shift, before she'd start to feel the air change and realize I'd stopped orbiting around her gravity. But Delaney's greatest fear wasn't abandonment. It was irrelevance. That's why she showed up unannounced at my sister's birthday dinner 2 nights later, wearing a red coat she hadn't touched in years, the one she used to wear when she wanted to look accidentally irresistible. I could tell she'd put effort into it, more than she had in months. Hair curled, subtle makeup, that same perfume she used on our honeymoon, the one she accidentally left in a hotel room last year. The scent I hadn't smelled since she stopped pretending to be in love with me. She walked in like she belonged there. Like the months of Cold War silence between us didn't exist. Like I hadn't just uncovered a slow-motion character assassination crafted with surgical precision. Everyone else at the table, my sister, her fiancé, a couple of my friends from work, went stiff, unsure whether to hug her or duck for cover. I didn't get up. I didn't flinch. I simply looked at her and said, "You're not on the reservation." She laughed softly, too softly, like we were in on a joke only she understood. "Come on, Toby," she purred. "It's Amber's birthday. You really think I'd skip the cake?" Amber looked at me, waiting. Everyone looked at me, like I had the power to break or keep some unspoken rule. I nodded once. "Stay," I said, "but sit across from me." She did. Her smile stayed, but the temperature dropped. I could feel her scanning me, looking for cracks, trying to figure out why I wasn't unraveling, why I wasn't groveling, why I didn't ask where she'd been, or why her nails were done in a color she said she hated last month, why I hadn't texted, called, cried, because she didn't know what I'd done yet. The first course came, some overpriced bruschetta that tasted like soggy cardboard, but no one touched it. The table buzzed with small talk, but it all sounded like static. Delaney tried to re-enter the conversation like a thief returning to a house they once owned. She asked about work, about who was getting married, about a mutual friend's new job. Then she turned to me. "You get my text?" she asked, casual as ever. I took a sip of water. "No. I sent it yesterday." "No, you didn't." Her eye twitched. I smiled. Because I disabled her number. Not blocked. Disabled. I'd routed her messages to a third-party app that filtered them, flagged them, and logged them with timestamps, just in case. "You know what?" she said, her voice tightening, but still wearing the mask. "Can we talk? Just you and me. After this?" I nodded. "Sure." She relaxed. Too fast. Too early. I could tell she thought she still had room to maneuver. But she didn't know I'd already emailed the recordings, Jeremy's voicemail, her therapist lies, the forged HR letter, to a lawyer and 2 close friends. I had receipts. Literal ones. And a meeting scheduled Monday with her therapist's licensing board. But I didn't want a scene. I wanted her to see what it felt like to lose ground and not know how or when it happened. So when dessert came, and she leaned forward and said, "I've missed you," I didn't say a word. I just pulled a flash drive from my coat pocket and placed it on the table between us. Her smile twitched. "What's this?" she whispered. "Insurance," I said quietly. "Call it a backup." She picked it up, examined it like it might be fake. But the label, "Not Work, J," told her everything she needed to know. She didn't speak again for the rest of the dinner. She didn't finish her cake. She didn't even look at Amber when she said goodbye. I walked her to the sidewalk afterward. Not because I owed her anything, but because I wanted her to feel the full weight of silence outside the audience. She lit a cigarette with shaking hands. She always lit them too close to her lips, like she was daring the fire to kiss her. "You really want to go nuclear?" she asked. I shrugged. "I don't need to. You already did. I'm just turning the lights on." "I can still fix this," she said, eyes wet now, voice breaking. "You can't fix something you dismantled for sport." She looked at me like I'd slapped her. Maybe I had, not with my hands, but with truth, finally weaponized. Then she tried her last trick. She reached out, to touch my chest, to play the softness card, the familiarity card, the you-know-me card. But I stepped back, and for the first time since I met her, she looked afraid. 2 weeks. That's how long it took for the calls to start. From friends, from coworkers, even from her sister, the one who once told me Delaney just needed someone stable to balance her fire. I guess even fire burns too long when no one's putting it out. The flash drive had done its job. Quietly. Completely. I never uploaded anything publicly. Never shared the audio clips on forums or dragged her name through the internet. I didn't need to. The people who mattered knew. And more importantly, I knew. Her mother called me crying. Left a voicemail I didn't return. Said she was sorry. Said she should have done more. Maybe she should have. Maybe not. But I forgave her anyway. Because what else can you do with a woman who kept the proof in boxes she never burned? The legal stuff moved faster than expected. My attorney said it was like Delaney didn't know how to operate when the game flipped. She missed her first hearing. Filed counterclaims that collapsed under 10 seconds of scrutiny. Tried to stall with emotional distress. Didn't work. I didn't ask for money. Didn't want it. I just wanted out. Out of the mortgage. Out of the house. Out of the psychological maze she'd built inside my head. By the end of the month, I got everything I asked for. Freedom, distance, clarity. And something else I hadn't expected. Stillness. I moved into a tiny apartment above a used bookstore 3 towns over. The landlord's name is Bonnie. She's 74, makes lemon bars every Sunday, and doesn't ask many questions. My neighbors are quiet. I don't hear yelling through the walls anymore. Just creaky stairs and jazz music from the floor below. There's a park across the street with a fountain shaped like a turtle. I sit there most mornings before work with coffee that doesn't taste like salt. Sometimes I bring a notebook, not to write poetry or vent, just to list things I've noticed. Like how the barista at the corner shop says my name with a smile. Like how it's been 31 days since I last checked her social media. Like how peace doesn't always arrive like a sunrise. Sometimes, it slips in like fog through the cracks, quiet and complete. One day, as I was walking back from the bookstore, I saw a couple fighting on the sidewalk. The guy looked tired. She looked furious. I felt my stomach twist, not out of fear, but recognition. I remembered being that man. I remembered that tightness in the chest, that desperate hope that if you said the right sentence, the storm might pass. But I also remembered that storms don't pass. You just learn to stop building your house where it rains every day. Delaney sent one more email. Short. No subject line. I didn't think you'd actually go. You were never supposed to. I didn't respond. What was left to say? I didn't need an apology. She didn't owe me closure. Because I'd built my own. Brick by quiet brick. Day by quiet day. Love doesn't die with betrayal. It just finds new soil. And this time, I'm planting mine in ground that doesn't shift beneath me. So if you're reading this, and you feel like the only thing keeping you inside the house is fear of the unknown, walk out. Don't slam the door. Don't set it on fire. Just leave. Sometimes peace doesn't come with answers. Sometimes peace is just what's waiting for you when you stop begging questions to love you back.